welcome to the Calisthenics YouTube channel. My name is Dennis, and today I will present you the first video of a series focused on case studies. In our case, we refer to a case study as a detailed analysis of one of our athletes' journeys. To start off, a little disclaimer. Although with these videos, we don't want to answer any specific research questions, it is good to remember that case studies, if we look at the hierarchy of scientific evidence, they're at the lowest level of the scientific literature. So they shouldn't be used as a universal truth applicable to everyone. That said, with this video, we hope to help you understand how, in order to reach your goals, it is almost always necessary to work with a well-structured and fully customized training plan. If we look online, we find thousands of tutorials that seem to show that learning a skill is an extremely linear process. You reach a certain progression and then you just go on to the next. But as you probably have experienced, in reality, training isn't as simple and linear. The reality is everyone is different and encounters different difficulties. Therefore, it is crucial to know when to do what, or having someone that does that for you. The first subject we will analyze is Patrick. Patrick came to us almost 2 years ago. His goals were reaching the planche, the handstand push-up, the one-arm pull-up, and the front lever. By now, he has reached almost all of them, doing handstand push-ups with 25 kg extra, holding a full planche for 8+ seconds, and holding 10 seconds of full front lever. In this video, we will focus on his progress in the planche. To start off, we can see Patrick in the beginning of his journey. Here we can see Patrick's stats before the journey with us and after. In the beginning, he weighed 67 kg. In the picture on the right side, he weighs 80 kg now. As you can see, besides reaching all the skills, he put on a lot of weight too, which we consider to be muscle mass for the most part. If it always makes sense to put on muscle mass to reach certain skills, we will look at in another video. Like many people that already have a few years of experience and come to our coaching, Patrick claimed that he could already hold a straddle planche. Well, the reality looked like this. Here we can see what he considered a straddle planche at the time. As you might see in this video, his legs are actually in a straddle position and his arms are straight, but everything else is completely off. The shoulders are in elevation, the protraction is completely missing, and his hips are so high that they look like they're more like in a handstand than in a planche. This form in the straddle planche is extremely common, and many people underrate how long it takes to go from this form to the one with the right activations. In fact, if your planche looks like this, it doesn't make any sense to clean the straddle. You should start from scratch and put your ego aside. As always, when we start working with a new client, we give him some tests to do. In Patrick's case, we gave him a tuck planche. As you can see, we can pinpoint the same mistakes we saw in the straddle. The hips are too high, and the protraction and depression are completely missing, as well as 100 other things. This was our starting point. Since Patrick already had a good shoulder strength, we mostly worked with the elevated planche lean to understand the right activation. This kind of work allowed us to work with very high volumes and a very high buffer, so he could really focus on all the little details. After 1 month of work, we tested the tuck planche again. This is the result. Here we can see a well-executed tuck planche. The arms are straight, the shoulders are depressed, the scapula nicely protracted, the serratus activated. The hips, even if they're minimally high, are in a much better position than they used to be. We spent the next months working on the tuck planche, adding volume week by week, and then with time, getting longer holds. The next step after the tuck planche is the advanced tuck planche. For many athletes, this step takes a very long time and usually needs very specific work, especially what concerns the core and the hamstrings. In Patrick's case, we didn't need that. After only 3 months of coaching, we tested Patrick's first advanced type planche. As you can see from the following clip, his scapula activation is lacking, but the activation of the hips and hamstrings are already on point, so no accessory work for core and hamstrings were needed for Patrick. In your case, this could be different. The only thing we needed to focus and work on were improving his shoulder and scapular strength. After 6 months of coaching, Patrick held these 10 seconds of extremely clean advanced type planche. From the cramps at the end of this video, you can see that his hamstring activation was actually on point. So far, so good. Now we were at a point where the majority of athletes get stuck. That point is the jump from the advanced type planche to the straddle planche. Many athletes have mastered the advanced type planche. They understand the right activation, they can hold it for 10 plus seconds, but they don't seem to understand how to get the straddle. Well, how did we make this jump with Patrick? In his case, we used the one-leg straddle planche. Before showing it, it is worth noting that in parallel to the advanced type planche work, we used the bent arm straddle. Why did we use that weird variation? The bent arm straddle planche makes it possible to understand the right activation for the hips that we will need for the straddle planche. In many tutorials, you can see that the bent arm straddle planche is used as a primary exercise for the straddle planche. We think this doesn't make any sense at all because the elbow and shoulders are in a completely different position. The advantage that the bent arm straddle planche gives us is that you can focus solely on the hip activations without being too demanding on the shoulders. Technically, it is a very difficult exercise, and if performed correctly, it will cause terrible cramps in the glutes and hamstrings. Therefore, it's one of the exercises that our athletes hate the most. But all the hard work and frustration always pay off, as we can see from this clip. This is one of Patrick's first one-leg straddle planches. As you probably have noticed, his hips are on point. The one-leg straddle planche is a very particular progression for the planche. It is probably the most difficult planche if looked from a technical standpoint, and is not fit for everyone. If you have difficulties with the step, it's probably better to use something else and save a lot of unnecessary frustration. Since it worked so well, we kept using the one-leg straddle planche for Patrick and started inserting technical work for the straddle planche using loop bands. The exercise you can see here is called the Planche Race. This exercise is extremely useful to understand the right engagement of the glutes and the core when lifting into the straddle planche, as well as understanding the proper alignment. Mastering the race is a good way to be sure that once you hold the free version of the straddle planche, your alignment will be good and you will be able to lift your feet from the floor already in a good position. These kinds of technical exercises can be done 1 to 3 times a week using extremely low intensities. The result of 2 months of constant work is this extremely solid one-leg straddle planche. As you can see from this clip, Patrick has the tendency to fall forward and still has to understand that in the planche it is extremely important to push back. This is for different reasons. When pushing back, it's easier to stay activated and depressed, as well as to get the serratus working. At the same time, it allows us to keep the balance and not to fall forward. Technical work was always integrated in Patrick's training plan. The reason for this is that when working on the one-leg straddle planche and the straddle planche, it is extremely easy to neglect technique In this clip, you can see an example of a technical exercise he was doing, where Patrick goes from the advanced tuck planche to the straddle planche with the help of an elastic band. The next clip is a training clip after 30 months of coaching. This is an extremely solid one leg straddle planche, and in contrast to the one we've seen before, he manages to push back. At this point, we knew Patrick was ready for the straddle. And here it is, Patrick's first well-executed straddle planche. In this clip, you can see that he's still far from perfect, but his hips are almost in line with the shoulders. The protraction is a bit weak, but the elbows are straight and the posteropelvic tilt engaged. After only 1 month of work, Patrick could already hold the straddle planche for 5 seconds. Since his straddle planche was already so narrow, and we worked so much on his posteropelvic tilt and hips activations, for most people it is necessary to work on the straddle planche for a very long time, reaching very long holds and inserting other exercises to be ready to hold a full planche. For Patrick, this wasn't necessary. After only 4 months on working on the straddle planche, he could already hold a full planche. While in the full planche, the leverage is way more unfavorable than in the straddle planche, the activation of the hips is much easier for most people. Patrick actually had an easier time holding the full planche than the straddle. This is an exception, showing again how training is extremely individual. After 19 months of coaching, Patrick reached one of his lifetime goals. Since we worked with him for a very long time, we understood patterns that worked and others that didn't. With the right formula, just in a few months, Patrick went from holding a few seconds of full planche to an extremely solid full planche. Here you can see where he is now. Now that the full planche is reached, we can tackle other goals. We started working on the Maltese and on supine planches to prepare his bicep tendons for the stress that these new exercises will bring to him. It took 23 months for Patrick to go from nothing to become one of the strongest athletes in Austria, holding one of the cleanest full planches in the country, handstand push-upping 25 kg for full range of motion, and even holding a front lever, which always was one of his biggest weaknesses. This wouldn't have been possible without smart planning and the consistency and passion Patrick put into his training every day, especially being 180 and weighing 80 kg. While smart programming for sure plays a big role in how quickly an athlete can improve, the technical details are extremely important, especially for skills. The weekly feedbacks Patrick got allowed him to tackle one problem at a time. Studies have shown that tackling one little detail at a time is way more effective than just getting a global feedback and just trying to repair everything at once. If you want to learn more about this topic, you can follow a link in the description where you can find a paper talking about this. I hope you enjoyed this video and could learn something from it. As stated before, this is a case study just concerning Patrick. Your journey might look completely different. It could take you longer or a shorter time to reach the planche. If you are interested to go on a journey like this with us, you can find us on Instagram at @stenics_, where you can see the progress our athletes are making, and we put out a lot of free information. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please help us grow this channel. May consider giving us a like, sharing it with your friends, or subscribing to bring more knowledge into this sport. This was Dennis from Team Stenics. Have a good one.